Okay, great. Hi, this is Adam Asnes here for our September webinar. We skipped August because everybody was on vacation. Anyway, welcome. Really happy to have you here as our guest. We've got something really kind of cool. We've got some new developments that we saw, and we're going to talk about what that actually means in terms of changing the development process. We've got a great guest. We've got Joel here, who I'll introduce momentarily. Now, before we get going, I'm just going to mention a couple of things. First of all, we're going to present, and then we're going to have questions after we present. But I always encourage people that instead of waiting to kind of make up those questions till the end, like if we say something and it gives you an idea, like something you want to ask about it, write it in the questions interface right away. That's that Q&A thing in Zoom that has a little question mark in it. Go ahead and write it right away. And the reason why I always say this is that if you're like me, if you don't write it down right away, either you forget it or you think about the question and then you don't listen. I'm not accusing you, but that's what I would do. So that's my advice. Use the Q&A over the chat. We'll monitor both, but for my sake, if I have one place to look at, it's better. For the people on LinkedIn Online, I can't monitor that real time. I didn't ask, but perhaps we have Daniel from our team monitoring it, and he can shuttle me or questions via Slack, or Kate can do it. Kate is the person who sends all these emails out, and she's quite the personality in the industry. So if you don't know Kate, you should. Anyway, we're going to get started talking about Figma. Now, when we talk about Figma, I should just set the stage. I'm assuming everybody has some familiarity with what Figma is, but if you don't, it's really quite a revolutionary design tool for user interfaces. It's really takes some of the design needs out of the developer's hands and puts it in professionals who work on UI and are focused on those areas. It's kind of remarkable to me that Figma, I should have looked this up, but my guess is they have over 90% of the designer market share. It's kind of crazy. I haven't really, you almost never even hear of a competitor, which is weird to me. Anyway, so Figma is the natural place to talk about when we talk about the design stage. So with that, I'm going to introduce here Joel. Joel Sahleen. I first met Joel. I'm assuming you can read this just fine. I first met Joel years ago when he was working at Domo. I was in the area in Salt Lake. Lingoport does a lot of business with companies in the Salt Lake area, particularly the Church of Latter-day Saints, like uses all our stuff everywhere. And so I visited Domo and I met Joel. I went, this is a really smart guy. So I've kept up in touch over the years. He's actually never been a customer, but he's somebody that I respect tremendously in the industry. And so I'm very pleased to have him here today. Joel, do you want to say something about yourself and what you've been up to?
I'm Joel. It's nice to meet everybody. I've been doing this for quite a while, around 15 years. I've done a lot of localization infrastructure, a lot of code-based internationalization. I've been at several companies, most recently Spotify, where I managed the internationalization engineering team. And I've also taught some things on data-driven development at Middlebury Institute and using metrics pulled from uh, our TMS to chart changes and word counts, things like that, make a nice dashboard for the execs and everything. So I'm happy to be here, happy to talk about some of the changes that this new technology may introduce into the localization process. And with that, I'll hand it back to Adam.
Okay, thank you. Also, I'm remiss, Olivia, if you could turn your camera on briefly. There we go. Olivier will
Bonjour.
join us on the webinar. He leads product development. He's going to show you what's new and why this is what we're talking about is quite a bit more than a Figma plugin. And I don't want to steal thunder, so I won't talk anymore about that. But all right, so let's just talk about Figma, Joel, a little bit here. How has the adoption of Figma changed the development process?
Well, I think it's primarily been in two ways. One, it gives like the equivalent of an IDE for designers in many ways, in that developers previously were working over in their tool and designers were working in something like Photoshop, even though it wasn't necessarily originally built for UX design. And Figma gave a single tool that was dedicated primarily to UX design. And most importantly, it gave a way to hand off what the designers did to developers so they could take the information they needed to actually build the UI directly from the Figma. And what that's really done is incorporated design more deeply into the development process. So rather than being something separate that kind of sits to the side, it's actually now part of the development process.
Right. And I'm going to add that it's not just layout. You can actually create a button in Figma, click on something and show an action. So it's a lot more than just a design palette. It really
Yes.
kind of gives you a flavor of how the application is going to work. Um, so I along the Figma design conversations I've had. This was like a few years ago. So people who know me know I ride bikes a lot. Okay. And I'm out on a ride with a friend who's a designer. And he worked for a very for a company that very much mobile oriented, very UI oriented in their product. And we were talking about developer strings and all that. And he said to me, and this is like, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years ago, he said, no developer is allowed to write a string. It has to always be, there are people that are dedicated to that. And at that time, that was a very forward thinking thing. So again, you have this kind of disconnect that is more productive and more specialized between the actual creation of the application and the design and modeling of the application. So the real specialization going on in product development. So there's a separation here. So if we talk about that in terms of life cycle, people talk about the software life cycle. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this kind of a graphic. Maybe let's talk about how UI UX is part of the life cycle and what does that actually mean?
Well, I know at some of the places I've worked, design has been a very separate thing that has occurred, and then the software development lifecycle is something that's outside that. What really happens with Figma and tools like Figma is that it really gets integrated at the same moment. It would be in section three here, where you're doing the system design and the architecture design. You're actually doing the UI design at the same time. And so when it gets to implementation, stage four, then everything the developer needs to complete the app, or at least the interface part of it, is already there for them. They can generate their CSS from it, things like that.
So what does this mean for localization?
Well, I think the big opportunity for localization is that because you have this design stage that's at toward the front of the development cycle, there's an opportunity to get localization into that design stage, and with all the context and the visual context that goes along with it. And so rather than having to have it be at the end of the whole software development lifecycle, after everything's completed, then you do localization. Things like Figma really provide an opportunity for localization to be at the front of the development lifecycle and to be integrated into what is given to the developers to start their work.
Okay. So, as things are now, where's the disconnect of Figma with regard to localization and software development?
Well, I think, as I understand it, most Figma plugins that are out there, what they will do is they will send text out for translation from Figma, but they don't actually provide an artifact that can go into the code base. It might go out to the translation memory or something like that, where it's there to be leveraged. But in the same way that Figma provides all the information that a developer needs to do the design of the application, there's a real opportunity to provide the actual artifacts, the translations from the get-go, using some kind of Figma plugin.
Right. So what we're referring to is, when you design something, it doesn't generate the code. With Figma, it's very
It kind
cool.
of does that now, but
Yeah, but the developer has to make it happen. You know what I mean? And so you have the same issue here. The developer has to make it happen. And in many cases, what I see out there is people have a Figma plugin and they use it maybe if they're advanced, they use it to pseudo localize. So they let the designer see what it looks like, or they machine translate because if you're machine translating, you don't really need pseudo localization. You see what it looks like. There may be some issue with padding the character, but not really. Um, and you can see, oh, this is German, it's got to expand and it's going to be okay. Um, but then it's sort of like,
you're done.
yeah, it's kind of like it's lost. Um, this was something that we looked at as kind of like a really fabulous opportunity for the industry, but we're going to get into this. It changes processes. So this is the point at which I'm going to let Olivier come on and talk a little bit, take my screen. Olivier, we have a few screens. You could just tell me when to go next, and then or you could steal my screen, whichever.
Next, please. Thank you, Adam.
Okay, great.
So at Lingoport, we're looking at the concept of going from Figma to providing artifacts to developers so that both the source strings that have been authored on the Figma side are already available to them, and also the translation strings are available to them. So what we're going to do is we're going to show a demo that shows a little bit the translation starting with Figma designs as is illustrated in this diagram here. Designers, they play with Figma. So that's where they design the application from a visual perspective, if you want. And it provides developers with the meat to start writing, creating software. What we do is from Figma, we have a plugin that goes to Localizer. And Localizer is our main tool to automate translation, going typically from repository to a TMS. But in this case, going from Figma to a TMS or an LLM or an MT. So there are different ways to hook things up here. What happens is that then from Localizer, we are going to send things to, in that instance, Trados Enterprise for this demo. It will come back, and in Figma, then you can see the translation for people who want to have a localization framework of mind. So in French or in Russian or in Finnish, you'll be able to see what those translations look like in an actual design. We have different ways to also provide those return strings. One of the companies asked us to do, I want you to translate into 10 locales with MT and then return only the longest strings for each one of the strings in English. So some of the strings are returned in Russian, some of them are returned in Spanish, some in French, depending on their length. So you really have a sense for if your application, the layout is okay for all the locales. in one view, as opposed to having to iterate through different views. Localizer is used to translate with the TMS. Localizer is not a translation management system, but we interact with a number of different ones, the main ones, and again, also MTs and ALS. So next slide. Hey, John.
Yeah. Just a little technical difficulty. There you go.
No, I was saying hi to John, who just joined it. Yeah, sorry. So pretty much in the demo, what I'll show is in Figma, those are design elements that start with something really, really simple to illustrate the purpose here. You have some strings that are authored in English with register, next, and so on. And so from Lingoport, via the plugin, you'll get back Sanskrit or something that's really specific for developers. And that's really the key of what we want to show here, as opposed to other platforms. The key that will be used in the actual artifact, in the actual resource file, where the translation will be done in the application, is available to translators. You can specify how that key is going to be generated, but it's generated so that when a developer starts with his application or her application, as opposed to saying register as a hard-coded string, it will refer to F2D register 6, and for the English locale, it will return register, and it will show as in the left-hand side. And for the French locale, it will return s'inscrire, and so it will show what's in the middle item here. Next slide. So what happens here is once the Figma designs, have been translated, the second part takes place, which is the generation of files that are going to be pushed to the Git repositories for developers to interact with them directly. So even before they start developing a new part of the application, they will have the strings available to them in English and in the maybe 10 or 50 locales that were in which they were translated in Figma. It's already there for them. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to rewrite, register, copy it from somewhere, from an Excel sheet, or do a copy paste in Git. No, it's already there. It's already in a file that corresponds to their needs. So in iOS, the file is going to be a certain specific format. In Android, it's going to be a different format. In JS, for example, it's going to be probably JSON. In C#, it's going to be regex. In Java, it's going to be a properties file. It's already going to be there for them with the right key available. So their framework on the development side will leverage the file formats that has been created in Git directly for them. So it's really a gain of time, but also a gain in terms of quality, and a gain in terms of the content has been verified or validated previously. So from Figma to dev, it may take a week, it may take 2 weeks. It's already validated. You have something that developers can rely on from a translation and an authoring of strings perspective. Next slide. In the next slide, what you're seeing is a very typical file format for a lot of apps, which is a JSON file format. And you'll notice the F2D register 6 on line 7, it says register in English. And so developers, when they write their application, they say, give me F2D register 6 for this locale. For English, it's register. And then on the next part in French here, on line 7 again, you see the same key, and this time is s'inscrire. So you see that when you'll have the locale turn into French, it will say s'inscrire. I'm going to steal the screen here, and I'm going to show what it looks like when we do the demo here. So in the demo, what you're seeing here is a typical Figma design side of things, the same one that I put in the slides, and we have a Lingoport Localizer plugin here, and that's where you select strings to be translated, and you send them to Localizer. So the very first thing is when you're here, what you'll do is you'll say, give me some strings here. I want to maybe just select that string or select those strings. And you see that in the plugin here, you have the strings that are selected. Maybe some of them you don't want to be sent for translation, maybe those, for example. And maybe you have a login here and a login there. Maybe you want to send both of them, and there are going to be two different key value pairs that are going to be sent. Once that's done, I'm going to move to Command Center. So I'm a designer here. Now, what happens in Command Center here is you have a number of projects. You see two projects in Command Center, one that's for Figma, and that one that's for the developers. So when I send things from Figma here, it ends up here to start with. And here you see that the strings that are to be translated here, they are those strings. By the way, in here you'll also notice that you get the context for each one of the strings that have been sent from Figma. That's automatic. So search world photos here, it's a different one here. Sign up, it's a different one, and so on. When those are sent to be translated, again, it can be to different translation facilities. It will, in that instance, what I wanted to show you is in Trados Enterprise, what it looks like. This is Trados Online Editor. So a project has been created. I'm taking shortcuts here to make it really simple. But pretty much you see that if I go to login here, you get both the string to be translated. You'll get a translation here. You'll say Sanskrit or connection or something. And you have the context was captured from Figma using our plugin, going from Command Center over to Trados or to whichever. And you have this as a means to help with translation. When that's finished, so when you'll complete, accept the task and do the translation and everything else, it will be returned to Command Center, and in turns it will be available to the prototype here. So now if I go to the French view of things, you will get the translation that were returned from Trados via Command Center Localizer, and at that point you will get those items here. The other thing that happens is that keys are generated automatically. So for developers, they don't really care that it's Sanskrit in French or connected to, they couldn't care less. What they care about is how do I access my keys? I access my keys this way. So when they write their software, they need to know this more than they need to know that. Now they'll be able to validate that this is also things like Sanskrit, if they want to, they can change the locale. And with that key, the locale, if it's French, it should be this way. They can go from the UI design over to the application. So this is what happens in the Command Center. Then the second stage is going to this developer side of things and generating the keys that are there. And so from this here, when you run this analyze project, it will create the strings directly in the repository. Those are now strings that have been created in the repository. And if I want to, as a developer, I can verify things. So I can check, for example, here, I can go to the source code. And I should have picked another one, but it doesn't matter. So you see that I have the key, and I have the English file and the translated files that correspond in different parts of the directories here based on what the developers want. It's not what we want, it's what developers want. So if developers want a JSON file, it will be a JSON file. If they want keys that start with F2D, like Figma to Dev, that's what they'll have. If they want strings that have a numeral at the end, that's what they'll have. If they want other file formats, or maybe EN at the end of the file name here, that's what they'll have. Once that's set up, it's always generated the same way. So developers know what to expect and everything is there for them. That's it from me. I'll stop sharing and back to you, Adam, if you want to steal the screen.
All right. Am I still sharing? Olivier, can you see my screen?
I'm going to stop sharing and I don't see your screen. I need to go and get the screen.
How about now?
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
correct.
good.
Adam,
Good.
Adam, sorry, we have one question in the chat related to what Olivier just presented. So maybe just look at it. Maybe it's better to answer it now or later, whatever you decide.
Sure. Okay. It says, are you able to also pass character limitations from Figma onto the TMS for different keys?
So that's funny that you should ask because we're adding that in development now. So it's going to be part of the next release. It's not part of it now, but it will be in the next release. Yeah.
I will also say that the translator does see a visual now. So they can see what does this button look like. It's not as good as a hard limit, but it's something right now. And really next release we're talking probably Olivia will shoot me for saying this, but it's this year, certainly. I'll push for something sooner than that, but that's why Olivier loves me. All right. I'm also going to mention the same person who answered that question said that he likes pseudo localization better for modeling a language, and I understand why. It lets him see the impact very quickly for all kinds of languages, not just let's see what the German looks like or whatever. So I agree with him on that. So good point, Jose. All right. How can we, this is a question for you, Joel, back to you. How can you're seeing this actually, I don't think you've seen the demo that
No.
Olivia just gave. So you're seeing it raw just like everybody else. How can we use the design process and Figma to prioritize localization?
Well, I think there's two things that kind of jump out at me immediately. And that's first that it just shifts everything left or earlier in the process for localization. And as you put it in the past, rather than being something that drags behind and slows you down when you're getting to release, it's something that is actually there from the beginning and doesn't affect your release at the end. The other advantage I see for localization is something that you brought up in the discussion with your friend, which is maybe developers shouldn't be writing all the strings. Maybe there are some that they should write. And there are some questions I have around interpolation and things like that and how that works out. But to have actual content designers, people who know your branding, people who know your voice, and have them generating the strings rather than developers is a huge win, I think.
Okay, I agree. And by the way, we have another really good question, and you're not getting ahead of yourself. We'll answer that in the Q&A part. Thank you. I'm just going to mention, like, about a month ago, I was at a conference, another Adam story, local conference, and it was not at all localization oriented. It was developer oriented, and uh, just talking with one developer while we're, sort of having a refreshment this, what do you do in that conversation? And he's like, oh yeah, we have to do localization. And his words, man, localization always feels like a boat anchor on us. That's like my whole like globalization career has been about that. So to me it's always really important, if we're going to use technology, how do we integrate localization? So it's almost like it's just expected, it's part of the process, it's served up, it's part of the process automatically, it's hand in glove, so to speak. And how do we make it so that people realize, no, this is actually really cool for developers because your audience is now so much bigger. The joke I like to say, well, it's not a joke, but the example I like to use is like, rightly so, design has really spent a lot of time on the color blue, or that's just an example. And it's a good thing. User interfaces have gotten a lot, we expect them to be pretty and, a good thing to look at and a good thing to use. And localization is so fundamental to the experience, the user experience, that it's every bit as important as the color blue. And we need to the only reason why it's begrudgingly pushed away is because of difficulties, because of slowing down velocity, of not understanding that. So I don't know. I always look to I'm on my soapbox here, and I need to shut up. But all right. So here's along those lines. I've always found that when you develop and you innovate, there's a lot of resistance because it involves change. So what would have to change between localization development for Figma to Dev to be successful?
I think the big thing is that there are custom formats, syntax that has been developed over the years, message format to regular string interpolation, and all that has been traditionally handled by developers. It may be that at this point, with if we're trying to move it ahead into the further up in the development cycle, that some of that knowledge and some of that skill and awareness of this syntax needs to move into content developers, people who are actually writing the strings. So they need to be able to write them in a way that will support the code later on. And I'm not sure how that could work with the variables that you can set in Figma as well, but you could maybe create some kind of format so you can actually see the interpolated variables in the string in Figma before you begin. But I do think that regardless of whether you have content developers do static strings and then code developers creating the more dynamic strings that have to be in the app, and like maybe revising the strings later that go through a separate process and everything. It really makes the content and the developers working on the same thing. So instead of there being developers and people who assist the developers, everybody's a developer. Everybody contributes to the final version of the program. And if there is one skill that I would say that as a translator or as an editor that would be really kind of a differentiator for people to learn, it would be those specific syntax formats. Being able to, in a sense, speak developer in your strings that you submit for translation could be a huge differentiator against like other linguists or other translators in the same language.
Okay.
I'm just going to add one thing because
Thank
it's really
you.
interesting what you said, Joel, and I didn't mention that in the demo that I did. What I just presented from Figma to Dev. The reality is that devs then take over. And
Right.
so one of the things that will happen is things like I need to have a parameter to say I have 15 users. 15, that's a number. That will be changed by the developer in the source string. The translation does not stop because it was not in Figma. If anything was modified by devs, that will then be used by Localizer to say, hey, that's the modified string. It needs to be
Yep.
retranslated into those 11 locales. That's a very few number of strings compared to the overall number of strings that are coming from Figma, but it's still something that needs to happen. And so the process does not just stop at Figma for translation. It continues down on for developers. And there are other things that may not be part of the Figma mindset. It's how to handle errors. Error handling is typically more on the dev side that not everybody thinks about that. And so strings will be added to the file that has been generated. And the fact that it gets regenerated later on, we are not going to step over that. We're going to keep those additional strings in resource files that are necessary for developers so that other things may happen that require translation that are downstream from what we're talking about here. So we're not saying developers, you are in a straitjacket here and you can only do that because they would go a little nuts, by the way.
Yeah.
But we're giving them we're giving them the facility to have something at their fingertips right from the get-go, to have all the content was authored on the design side and the translation was validated, but then they can continue developing their application, and it means also modifying strings. So thanks.
It's really a head start more than anything. You know, if you have 80% of your strings that can be handled in the Figma stage, then that's only 20% the developers have to do.
And I'm just going to say that sort of preempts one of the questions that came up here, which I'll reword is like, well, developer is going to have some error message or some pluralization or some operation. So I'm glad I actually made a note to talk about pluralization later. So we kind of covered that. So very good. All right. Oh, that was our last one. So we have a lot of questions. We will take the time to answer all of them. So that's great. The first question is near and dear to my heart. Is there an extra cost to connect Localizer to Figma? Was it included if you already use Localizer? If you already have Localizer, yes, there is a cost. It's not very large. It won't break your bank to add Figma functionality. I would say you've listed yourself as an anonymous attendee, so we can't contact you. You'll have to contact us. You can either write me, or chances are good you know Todd or somebody else here. Just write in, or at the very least, write support@lingoport.com will get to us. All right. Do you recommend Git integration with Localizer for when dev creates error message? We covered that just now during development that were not created. The answer to that is yes. So if it wasn't clear, because I really didn't introduce the nature of Localizer, and by the way, a command center is part of Localizer. Olivier referred to command center. That's really the sort of the UI part of Localizer that you use to, specifies what your source is and all kinds of controls and filters and really good stuff. It matches the string with visual context, and it's all very, very simple to use, but very, very powerful. So I'm tooting my own horn here. But yes, we do recommend integrating Localizer. As a developer maybe changes something, that's picked up automatically. Nobody has to communicate with you or anything like that. I had one user describe it as like when you walk into a room and the light sensor turns the light on. It's just like that. It happens. It's a beautiful thing. And we see teams with literally over 100 different product teams connected to Localizer, in some of our large conglomerate customers. You see plenty of that because it's so automated and they can manage so much scale. All right. What's the format of the file when strings in Figma gets exported to Localizer? I'm going to let Olivier answer that.
Yeah, that's the decision of the developers. So developers, if they write an application that's based on a certain framework, they'll want to have artifacts, meaning in that instance, resource files that are in a specific format. Developers will decide if they want to have a regex file that whose locale is indicated on the file itself, like messages.fr underscore fr dot regex. That's what they want. That's what they'll get. If they want to have a localizable.strings file, if they want to have a strings.xml file for iOS or Android, if they want to have a JSON file, if they want to have files that have a directory where the locale is there, they decide, we generate.
Okay, good. Here's I'll just mention that probably if you're in localization, you've experienced weird file formats. Rather than making the developers go back and change all that, there is a transform utility in Localizer that will pivot that format into something that can go into your TMS or translator workbench, and then pivot it back when it goes into the code so you don't break anything. I'll just mention that. All right. This was in the chat, but I said I would say it. Says, maybe I'm getting ahead of the webinar and you'll answer this later, but what about tags? Our Figma files include amounts that developers would later replace with amount then send the keys to localization. Okay, so we did kind of answer this. This is the same thing as the pluralization question. Or they add formatting tags. I understand that with Lingoport, we still have to send the same text to localization twice. First from Figma, then from the developers. Go ahead, Olivier.
No. So maybe I was not very clear then. When files are translated in Figma, then the generation for the files in the repository for developers will be both the source files and the translated files. It will be generated for both. Now, if you want to add more locales in the dev side, which is fine, let's say that you have 10 locales that you did in Figma. Those 10 locales will be in the repo. You want to add 5 locales at the dev side, you add 5 locales that will be translated then into, I don't know, those new 5 locales. But the 10 locales that were translated in Figma will be available to the developers. And then when you modify text, obviously those will need to be resent from the dev side, for example, back and forth. So I hope that's clear.
Well, I think the question also just relates to if kind of the problem with the state of current Figma Figma plugins. Like I've translated off of Figma, and now do I throw that out, or do I just throw it in memory, or do I translate it again once it's in the developer? The point of Figma to dev is no, you don't translate it again. You've got this artifact, and so you don't need to. All right. Okay.
Oh wait, I saw Akim. So hi Akim, just saying hello. Does that go back and forth? Sometimes developers must create additional strings that were not designed in Figma. Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. So they will add those strings, and Localizer will pick them up. It will be sent to, let's say, Trodas Enterprise, as you may know that framework, and back, and it will be translated. So yeah, it's exactly right.
Okay, I'm juggling between chat and Q&A. If you can make my job easier and put your questions in the Q&A area. Is it possible to add any character limits? Oh, we did that question. Okay. Does it deal with rich text? Olivier,
So
you might as
far
well
as
keep the picture open.
actually, I don't know how rich text is going to be set up in Figma, to tell you the truth. So I'm not a Figma guy. But what you can do in definitely in strings that are part of a dev side is you can add bold and whatnot, HTML type tags or other tags depending on the framework again that you're using as a dev. So I'm not sure if that moves directly from Figma, whatever text you have in Figma, it will be moved over to the repo, but I don't know what you can do in Figma that's going to be moved over there.
It's too bad we don't have Peter here. He's our Figma guy. So not a great answer, but we can get back to you, Ian, on that. All right. Let's see. Localizer is not a TMS, but it can be connected to a TMS, right? So Localizer will be a bridge to integrate Figma to a given TMS. Am I correct? So how is
Yes,
Localizer? Okay.
yeah, that's what I was trying to show in the demo. I used Trados Enterprise to do the translation. You could use other TMSs, of course, or again, an NMT directly if you want to, or ChatGPT if you want to directly. Uh, then you need to review and modify whatever. So typically a TMS will have the review process. It will be, a very translated, human reviewed type of things with all the benefits of a TMS. So the nice thing is that because it's prior to the actual development of the application, you can really do a great job on the Figma side to validate exactly how you want to say things in different locales. And then when it goes to the developers, it's already set up for them. So you can use the TMS. I think it's you have the time to do that. That's when you want to use that time actually. That's my take on it.
The question goes into the difference of other plugins, and again, the difference is we're creating an artifact here. We also collect the context associated to that string. There's a lot of TMSs that we support. And so that's nice. But there's also a part of Localizer that sort of gets lost against like the typical Git connector. There's all kinds of file checking. There's all kinds of control. There's no API that a developer has to incorporate into their repositories. There's nothing like that. Literally, you just say, where is the source located, and Localizer does the rest. There's all kinds of really simple locale mapping. If some team has, their own locale that's not standard ISO code for what French is, instead of FR, they say FRA or whatever. Localizer doesn't care. It'll let you map that very quickly. So there's all these controls that kind of deal with the disorganization that you actually see once you have some kind of scale in your development teams. That can really be a problem for localization, and also checking the files when they come up. So let's say developers have duplicated string IDs. That's a no-no because you don't actually know what string is going to get pulled up. It'll test fine for the QA department if they're not hitting that, but it won't be great for the user in those locales. So those are the kinds of things that Localizer will police. Conversely, when code comes back from localization, and for those localizers in here, man, you guys mess up a lot, and we see it. And so Localizer will stop that if it's going to do something that's going to break the code, which happens a lot. Localizer will stop it, and not just stop it. It'll say, hey, in this line, in this file, you did this. And so it's very quick to correct. These are the kinds of things that Localizer adds. It's just a whole list of these things. ISO pluralization handling, for instance, gets wrong a lot. And again, that will break the code. So those are the kinds of things that really add a lot. Okay, I'm selling, so I got to stop. I'll get slapped by my team. Sorry, we need some questions for Joel here too. He's getting off easy. Hi, Todd and Olivier. Lou's here. Oh, our friend Lou's. We've had her as a webinar guest too. I have a couple of questions for you. Question one, what about strings that use interpolation? Is there a way in Figma to specify values in the string that will require to be updated at runtime in a way that Lingoport can pick on those? How are the string IDs generated, and is there a way to customize these rules? Olivier, you're on the spot again.
Liz, you shouldn't do that. No, kidding. So the generation of the keys is configurable, Liz. So you'll be able to decide a few things. Again, like a prefix, a suffix, a counter. If it's based on the length of the verbiage that you have on the value itself in Figma. So that's on the second question. The first question is, I think it's more developers who know how the parameters are going to be created. So, for example, if you have a parameter that's curly braces 0, that's one way that you can do that in a certain framework. If you have one that says dollar username, that's a different type of parameters. Developers will know that. If it's something that's like Adam was saying, nicely message format with count, plural, one, blah, 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 developers will know that. So it's more on the developer side because it's directly tied to how the call to those strings is made and the variable that is coming in from the application itself. Designers do not know that. The designers would not know if it's a dollar, $D, or $S, a dollar username, a curly braces username, whatever. There are so many different ways to do that. And so when you create a regex file or a JSON file or this type of file, typically you have a certain type of way to create parameters or placeholders if you want. Leave that to the developers. They'll do it right. And when that's modified, or that string that requires a counter or that requires plural something, it will be resent for translation so that in the translated side, it will also have the counter the right way, the parameter the right way, the placeholder the right way, the ISO message format the right way. So that's how I would do it.
Okay. Next question was answered. Okay. I'm wondering how would this is a really tough one to parse, and I think this is another Olivier question here. I'm wondering how would this Figma to Localizer to TMS to dev workflow work for website localization? Oh boy, these days websites are full-blown applications, but right now we handle three different stages. Designer works on Figma, sends it to PMs, uses plugin to send strings from Figma to TMS, then devs push strings to the tool. Afterwards, translators need to confirm if all are fine with variables pushed to the strings not existing in Figma. Is it possible to make the process easier and faster? Did you catch all that, Olivier?
Uh, uh, I'm not sure. I think we would maybe we need to meet with that person very specifically because I think there's a lot behind that question actually.
Right,
I
right.
think we really need to understand the process that's underpinning, and then maybe we can have a real discussion, like a mini consulting or something
Okay.
pretty fast.
Brunya, if you don't mind, we'll be in touch with you. It'll probably be Todd, who is referenced in Luz's question. He leads sales here. All right. That's all. Let me just see on the chat if somebody uh, there's questions about formatting, which I think we answered that we probably should have had uh, Peter on the phone in terms of some of the formatting questions in Figma, but we don't. I think that's it. All right. Well, thank you. I think we finished on time, which is always a good thing. And Joel, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I've really enjoying reconnecting with you as well. It's been a while. I've met Joel repeatedly over the years, so that's great. Olivier, thanks for your clear explanations as always and your leadership. And thank you everybody for attending and these great questions. I really appreciate that you've all been active participants here. Take care, everyone. We haven't figured out our October webinar yet, but you'll hear about it. We'll come up with something good. All right. Well, thank you very much, and take care, everyone. Thank you.